Hi YouTube, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Okay, so we are at video 15, I think, on this making a new knife pattern from start to finish. We are going to fit up a handle. So we have got our knife, and we have got a block of actually pretty nice looking cocobolo. We'll get a little close-up of it here. Tilt you down. There you go. It's actually a pretty nice piece of cocobolo. Cocobolo is one of my favorite woods. I think the last video I shot was choosing handle materials. Cocobolo is one of my favorite. I have heard of some knife makers that have developed an allergy to cocobolo. So far I haven't. I hope that if I do, it waits a long time because I really like cocobolo. It's very dense, it's very oily, it's very stable because it does have the oil. It won't accept moisture from the air or you know, from water, mud, blood, oil, that kind of stuff. It won't accept it as well as wood that's not so oily, like maple or even to a point like hickory, you know, things like that, right? So what we've got here is this is what we call a three-piece knife. You have your, or full tang. So you have your, a full tang, you know, to where it's like the entire profile, right? And then your handle material. Well, we need to turn this into two pieces, and of course I'm not to that on the other ones, into two pieces, one that goes on either side. They both need to match, and they both need to have holes drilled in the right spots, okay? So the way we do this is going to be real easy, right? First of all, this is just a 1-inch thick block of wood, and the profile is just, I mean, it's a cutoff. I mean, I buy this stuff by the board foot, you know, so it might be 8 inches wide and 4 foot long, you know, whatever I get at the wood supply houses down in mostly Fort Collins. So we just need to make sure that there's going to be enough wood, you know, for our profile here, right? Okay. Which, remember, this particular pattern, the handle does not go all the way up to the ricasso. It goes just ahead of that first finger guard and then kind of comes up. Okay. Let's put that one away. So, and we are going to be using 1/8 inch pins. So let's go ahead and go over to the drill press. And I think I've got a video on this already, but that's kind of the fun part of this series, is that it's start to finish. So a lot of stuff that I would normally forget maybe to put into videos, you're getting the whole shooting match here. All right, so let's get you down here. Okay, so I've got a drill press with a number 30 drill bit, which cuts a 0.128 inch diameter hole. Okay, we're going to be using 1/8 inch pin stock, which is 0.125 inches in diameter. Okay, so this drill bit is going to cut a hole that's 3/1000 of an inch larger than our pin stock. Most human hairs, I've heard, are 3 to 5 thousandths of an inch thick. So you can think of that as literally a hair bigger than our pin stock. Most post-it notes, yellow post-it notes that I've measured, have been 5 thousandths of an inch thick. So you could say it's roughly half of the thickness of a post-it note, larger in diameter than our pin stock. Just to kind of give you an idea. Okay, so what we're going to do is we've got kind of an ugly spot right here in the wood. So, and this grain, the way the grain pattern is, I think it's going to look good no matter what kind of direction that we put it on. So I think we're going to orient the grain as much as we can, I guess, to where it's going to look pleasing in the finished knife. And then I just use a spring clamp. Okay, now you notice that I got a 1, 2, 3 block on top of the drill press table, right? And what that does is it lifts it up lifts the block up so that the jaws of the clamp, it doesn't, you know, they don't butt into the, see, they don't do that. Okay, so that way it sits nice and flat. All right, so we're going to drill, hang on, let me go grab my pins. Okay, these are pieces of 1/8 inch just pin stock. They're bent at a 90. You'll see the reason why for that when we go to glue it up here in a video or two. All right, so we double check, make sure that's going to go in. We've got our drill press running, not all the way as high as it'll go, but fairly quick. I guess it doesn't really matter how fast you go. Cocobolo is very oily, like I said, so it tends to gum up grinding belts. It also tends to gum up drill bits too. So when you drill this stuff, the curls from the drill bit, you know, the wood that the drill bit is cut, they won't come out and flake out. They'll have a tendency to come out and clog up the drill bit. So you want to make sure you get a good feed rate, you know, with good even pressure, and that way it'll tend to want to clear itself as much as it can. Anyway, so let's go ahead and drill the first hole. Okay, you saw how I did that in several steps and let the drill bit clear. Okay, now that we got our hole drilled, our first one, you take your pin, you put it in that hole. Now you can take your clamp off and it's going to stay in relation there, right? Okay, one thing that's fairly important when you're working on a knife around a drill press is to try to make sure that the spine of the blade is going to be going into your hand, okay? So grabbing it like this to where that spine, and I'm kind of going around you here too. Let's see if I can actually just put you in between my arms there. Okay, so keep the spine of the blade pointed towards your flesh as much as you can, especially in the direction of rotation. So this drill bit goes like this. Hey, you guys be quiet. So the drill bit goes like this, right? So if this drill bit was to catch this blade and rip it out of the grip of my thumb, the spine of the blade would go into the palm of my hand. Okay, and it'd be much less likely to cut me. Now, on this point where the point is, you know, that point, even dull, will still rip you up pretty good. But anyway, so just keep that in mind, that the drill bit can and will sometimes grab your blade and rip it out of your grip, and to try to make sure that if that happens, it's not going to injure you. Okay. Okay, so we got our second hole drilled and we got our pin in. Okay, let's go back to the bench. Okay, now we just take an ordinary pencil, number 2 pencil, whatever you got, okay, and you draw the outline of your tang. Okay, now the front part, this here, is going to be really easy to tell because you've got this point on this particular pattern, right? On a normal pattern, like on, say, a paring knife, you know, you'd have your ricasso, you know, to be able to, you know, you'll trace this curve and you'll know, okay, well, your ricasso is right here. The back part of the blade is not quite so easy once you pull the knife off to figure out where you want to cut that. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to go right about there, I think is going to look good. Okay, now we pull our pins, and then we're going to go from that mark, and we're going to draw what the face of our, that looks like a nice curve, doesn't it? Okay, so now our next thing to do is to go ahead and rough this out on the bandsaw. Now, I will say, just rough it out, okay? We're not going to cut completely to the line, and we're also not going to cut this back part here, because this is actually fairly flat and fairly at 90 degrees to this, okay? So that when we go ahead and cut that lengthways on the bandsaw, that's already a really nice, really nice surface to rest on the bandsaw table. And you'll see what I talk about, or see what I mean when we get there. Okay. Now let's get over the bandsaw. Now, you guys have seen this bandsaw before. I mean, it's a like a porta-band, only it's a DeWalt deep cut, variable speed. It's stuck on the highest notch. I've got a foot switch and a very small table on here. So we're just going to go ahead and cut just outside the line on this cut, and then kind of take some of this material out also. Okay, so that's where we're at. Let's go ahead and throw the scrap away. Now what we need to do is, this is a rough cut right here, right? Doesn't really look all that attractive, and we want to make it into something like this. That's nice and smooth, and it's radiused right, and it looks the way it should, right? Okay. Now notice it's still one block of wood, even though we need two pieces, right? We'll go ahead and we'll face this off to where it's just, while it's one piece, then when we split it, we know that they'll match, because the holes are a right size fit for our pins. You know, there's no slack in there, because it's only a couple of thousandths over our pin diameter. So we're going to go to the belt grinder to do that. Now you might notice something a little bit different in here if you've been following along with the series, and that's these buckets of water I've got up underneath here. You know, I used to have these, they were never set this close, but then I was going through Instagram, and one of the guys that I did the Forged in Fire thing with, Leon, of course I wasn't planning on doing it or giving him a shout out, so I suppose we better do the shout out right? He doesn't post a whole lot, so let's get on here and go Leon. Vanguard Smithing is his page. Let's see. Vanguard Smithing. You guys can pause this if you want to. So we'll do a shout out to Leon, right? Like I said, he was one of the guys that I did the Forged in Fire thing with, and he's a pretty entertaining guy. He does an awful lot of armor making, which you know, you wouldn't think that there would be a big call for armor in today's day and age, when you know, when people don't normally carry around like swords or bows and arrows, things like that. But apparently he makes a pretty good living for himself, making armor for there's a term for it, and I can't remember it at the moment, but it's the folks that like reenact like comic books and stuff. Comic-Con maybe, I think, is their big convention. But anyway, so he does some pretty dang amazing work on armor for that, and it's really cool. But anyway, so he had a post the other day showing his bucket, and I thought, you know, I had meant to do that when I moved to the new shop, and then completely forgot about it. And then as soon as I saw that post, I thought, man, Yep, I'm just going to drop everything and put that on there before I forget. Because those water buckets, they do catch an awful lot of extra dust. And with the, this new grinding room with the filters and, yeah. So anyway, so this works great. So thanks, Leon, for reminding me to do that. Okay, so our line right here, we're just going to, oh, I need the knife and the pins. Boy, I'm all over the place today. So what our goal for this is to cut down about to that line, and then we'll go ahead and do a test fit with our pins, and then grind it down until it's going to be where we want it to be. Okay, so like right here, we are the wood sticking up past where the metal's going to be. Okay, now this part it doesn't really matter, but this part it does. Okay, so we're going to need to face this off at 36 grit, and then we'll smooth it out at 220. Alright, that's going to be pretty close, I think. And it is. If we look at it from this side, you can see steel all the way to there. This looks to me to be looks like a pleasing arc, and I take these all the way up to the spine. Okay, I don't do the little thing on the back part here. That does make it easier to resheath it, but by leaving this up here, you'll still be able to sheath it good. But then that gives you good support for the web of your hand, in hard cuts. So that's why I leave that up there. Now you can tell, remember how I said Cocobolo is a very oily wood and it likes to gum things up? See how that's gumming that belt up? Now granted, that belt it isn't brand new, but it's still got quite a bit of life left in it. And that oily Cocobolo just gums that stuff up. Alright, so now let's go to a 220 grit belt. And then on these, I usually just leave the belts going at the slowest speed, or that grinder is the one we were just on is a single speed. This one's a multiple speed, and I just leave it on the lowest one when I'm doing handle work. Okay, so that's a pretty good 220 grit finish. I'll shut our fan off. Oh. See how much dust is on top of that water? So that's dust that will sink to the bottom of that bucket instead of being on the floor or up in my lungs or anywhere where it shouldn't be. Okay. So now what we have is we have our blade, and we have our handle scales. That match up really nice. We have a nice looking curve there. This part right here looks pretty good. It's not polished yet, but that's okay because most of this is actually gonna most of this wood is actually going to get ground off. So we don't want to polish this any more than what it is already, because we'll just be wasting effort. We'll be polishing mostly wood that's going to be going away. So now what we need to do is, we've got one handle scale, we need two, right? One for each side. So now that we've got that cleaned off, and our back is pretty much at 90 to the sides here, we need to split this in half. back over here to the bandsaw. And then you can freehand this, and you can get pretty good results. I find it's better, you guys know I work in batches, and so I find it's better just to go ahead and set up a jig. In this case, the jig is, no kidding, a scrap piece of angle iron, right? This is a pretty heavy piece, 1/4 inch walls, or 1/4 inch sides, and a couple of C-clamps. So the first C-clamp we're going to point down, and we're going to bring it up in here. Now your table is likely going to be different than mine, so you know, you might make a better jig than this, but this works pretty good. So the first one goes down, the second one goes up. Okay, and the last time that I had this on here, I made a magic marker on the table, you know, so I'd have a reference. And the table seems tight and everything, so we'll grab my chunk of 2x4. And the 2x4 is just you know, just a test piece, because pine is way cheaper than cocobolo. This is one of the few operations that I actually do use a push stick. Okay, so we're just doing a test cut there to see that it's nice and even. It's even here, you know, so this is the same thickness as this. This is the same thickness as this, and this is the same thickness as this, okay? So we just test that on a, you know, scrap piece of pine before we use our nice handle material. Then we can use one of those cutoff pieces for a push. And I think we're going to pull you around so you get this other view. I'm going to try to get you right up in there. Okay, so now the best way to do on this is what you're doing here is actually, you know, it can rest on the table, but we know that this is going to be, you know, parallel to this blade, right? So you got to keep the foot on the bottom here to kind of keep everything steady, right? And then you got to kind of wrap your hand around the camera, and then still make sure you can see everything. So what we're going to be wanting to do is the part that has not been cut yet, we want to put pressure on that part up to our jig, okay? So that way it's going to hold it parallel to our jig so that we get a nice smooth cut. All right, and then we'll use the push stick in the back for to advance it. Okay, so we got a pretty even cut going on there. We're a little bit skinnier up here than we are down here, but that's okay. And a little bit skinnier here than we are up there, which is all right. I mean, we'll fix that here in a little bit. Okay, so now let me stop off and grab a Kleenex because I'm not wearing a mask with this cocobolo so that you can hear me talk. Okay, so now we come back into the grinding room. Okay, so what we've got here is we've got a Home Depot Ryobi 4x36 belt sander. Not a grinder, a sander, I guess, right? That's because that's what the box said. It's also got like a little 6-inch disc over here on this side. The great thing about this is that with a foot switch still, because both my hands, I got a foot switch down at the bottom. This is how we get things mostly flat, okay? So first, before we forget, because this is the way, because right now we got them saw marks to tell us which is the inside and which is the outside. We also get an inkling as to what this handle is going to look like. That's going to look pretty nice. That's a real vibrant piece of Cocobolo. I really like those. Actually, honestly, I like all Cocobolo, not just the vibrant pieces, the orange pieces, the red pieces. Cocobolo is just one of my favorite woods. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and grind a little bit here and here of these two top corners, okay? That will let us know that is going to be, those are the outsides, all right? It's just something so we don't forget later. And it doesn't take much. Okay? So now we know these are the outsides. It also softens up that corner because now we're going to hold it like this. Okay? Now the easiest way to do this is to bring your foot switch back around. This is usually a pretty good time to wear a mask because this belt comes towards you. Alright? So all that dust is going to come right up in your face pretty much. Alright, so hold the block like this, or however you can get a good even grip with it, okay? Because this is all about evenness. Double check. Okay, now remember, when we cut on our bandsaw, the top here is thinner than the bottom part, which means that the top on this side is going to be thicker here than it is on the bottom. So it's going to be thicker on the left portion as we present it to the belt. Okay, so what we're going to do is we won't actually tilt it up on the side. We'll just put more pressure on the left side of this than we put on the right side of this, and that way the belt will cut more aggressively on the left side and it'll even it up a little bit. Okay, you can either leave it in one spot, or you can kind of float it left and right, or kind of turn it at an angle, whatever you want to do. I think they're all kind of work good. But what I have found is that if you can get your wrist and your forearm in line with the direction of the belt and at about the same height, it kind of seems to me like that kind of helps you keep everything nice and even. Okay, now also the biggest reason for the foot switch is that you apply the wood to the belt. Then you hit the foot switch, you make the grinder go. Now granted, you can't, if you push down on this, nothing happens, right? Okay, so you place it on there. Once the belt gets going, then you can start applying your pressure. When you're ready to stop grinding, you let your foot off the switch, okay? Let the belt come to a stop, then remove the wood. Okay, if you don't do that, if you just, get the belt going and you go to place it down, something is going to hit that belt before the rest. And then you'll, like if this part hits the belt first, you'll grind that part off and you'll never get it flat. Okay, so you place it, you start your belt, grind, stop your belt, then remove. Okay. Okay, see how I was placing more pressure on this side than I was this side? All of our saw marks are gone here, but we still have some here, which is what we want. Okay, so now all our saw marks are gone. This side table here is pretty flat, so we can check it. And we're pretty dang flat on there. We got a little bit of a sideways right there, but we're still going to hand sand this. Actually, I'm going to turn the fan back on. All right, so on this side, remember this was more narrow than this. So we put a little bit more pressure on this side. Okay, it sure looks like we've evened it up. And it might have a little bit of a bow in the middle. Yeah, it does, but we'll take care of that in hand sanding. Okay. Okay, so now when we go to hand sand this, remember now that, you know, both sides of everything are fairly smooth. I mean, this is, you know, this is smoother than the inside because that was a 80 grit belt, if I remember right. Okay. Still, that chamfered edge really lets you know which is which. Okay. So now take the insides and take yourself a pencil. Just like you're, say you're lapping a sharpening stone or something. Make yourself a series of marks to where they're all penciled up. Okay. This is, boy, that cocoa is really getting to me today. Okay, this is 80 grit, 3M, lasts 10 times longer, coarse, made in Canada sandpaper, right? You get this at Home Depot. This is a 12-inch, I think it's 12. 12-inch by 12-inch granite tile from Home Depot. It's about a ½ inch thick or so. Okay. Now, same thing. Put your, oh, first let's check and make sure they're flat, or see how flat they are, right? Okay, so you put that piece down on the granite plate. All right, and now you touch it. You're looking for that back or that front part to, or the opposite part to move up. And we're not really moving very much at all. Okay, but and then we'll check the other side. See, there we are. Okay, so this one has got a hump in the middle of it. All right, so we'll go ahead and take that out. Let's try to keep getting you just as, this camera doesn't have a zoom, so I'm trying to get you in just as close as we can. Okay. So here you're just trying to keep your pressure nice and even. Okay, most of our rocking is out there. And this one I think we were pretty good already. So we'll just check them to start with. They look pretty dang good. Now I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this. But hold your pieces together and then hold them up to a light and see if you see any light. Both ends, both sides. If you don't see any light, then you're pretty much good. Also check and make sure you're, you shouldn't have a gap, but it'll appear to be, you know, like a very small gap right there, but make sure that it appears to be even all the way around. We've got a little bit of one right there, and it's coming from the top piece, which that's the piece that we didn't hand sand, so. Okay, you can see all the pencil marks are removed. Put it on the plate. We're just getting the movement of the plate. Put it back up to the other side. Everything looks pretty dang good, I think. Yeah, looks pretty good. Okay, so the reason that we use 80 grit sandpaper for this, hang on. That's why you wear a mask all the time when you're working with this stuff. Mask and the grinding room if you can. So there's a couple of things going on here, all right? One is that we use 80 grit, or you could use 60 grit or 100 grit, you know, as long as you use something that's going to be coarse enough to leave scratches in here, okay? Because you want those scratches, because that gives the epoxy something to grab onto on that wood, especially on an oily wood like cocobolo, right? I've even seen guys go so far as to take like acetone and clean the side that's going to get glued up before they do the glue up to get rid of that oil so that it grabs. I've kind of noticed that as long as I use a coarse enough sandpaper so that I have plenty of good scratches for that epoxy to grab to, that I haven't needed to clean it with acetone or denatured alcohol or anything like that, okay? The other thing you might be noticing is that, like, you're thinking, well, hey, how come these, you know, how do you know that those holes are perfectly parallel and, you know, perfect to the blade, okay? And the thing for that is, honestly, it don't matter, okay? To start off with, like I said, we have 3/1000ths of an inch oversize in our holes, okay? 3/1000ths is a lot, all right? Now, double check and make sure that it goes together right, and that when you hold it up to the light, that you see no light coming through, okay? Now, notice that I did not surface grind this tang, okay? Didn't surface grind it, I didn't taper it, I didn't nothing, right? So there will be a little bit, I mean, technically there will be some slop in there, okay? But we've got oversized pinholes, okay? We've got 80 grit scratches on 80 grit scratches on the inside of our handle material. Our tang we roughed up with it's either a medium or a coarse Scotch-Brite belt, okay, which I want to say makes like a 200 grit or so finish. Okay, so you're going to have plenty of little bitty scratches in this steel for the epoxy to grab onto, right? Now, if you were to take this tang and you were to finish it to say 600 grit, and you were to finish these to 600 grit, then you would have a problem, because the epoxy would not have anything to grab a hold of, all right? Also, when you squeeze it together, when we go ahead and epoxy this up, and you squeeze that together so that, you know, you have a good tight fit, if your surfaces are finished to too high of a grit, you'll squeeze all the epoxy out of there, and there will be no epoxy that's left in there to grab and do its job, okay? So if you leave a coarse enough finish on the inside of your handle materials and on your blade, not only does it leave spaces in there for the epoxy to fill, but it also kind of masks any irregularities that might be in the surface of your steel. You know, like maybe you had to stay up in here a little bit longer with the belt to get more scale off, or maybe you've got a hammer mark or something like in there like that. Those coarser finishes will allow that to kind of blend in, which is a big time saver. So it gives you a handle that is more securely attached and takes you less time to make. Okay, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. And it leaves a good, attractive joint when you're done. All right? Now, I think, yeah, we're at 40 minutes already. Okay, so that is pretty much, I mean, this is ready to glue up already. Okay? The next video we will go over tang prep, and we'll go ahead and glue this one up. And I'll go ahead and wait until I grab the rest of these, get them all fit up or caught up to this one. We'll go ahead and epoxy a whole bunch of them at once, and then we'll go on to handle shaping, and then installing the pins, because these are all going to have peened pins. And I've got actually a pretty exciting new way of installing pins that I've got from making slip joints, that has been working really, really well on these you know, paring knives, neck knives, EDCs, they're full tang that have got peen pins. It takes a third of the time of peening that it used to take. You get an incredibly much more consistent peen. So when I say peen, you get a much more consistent grip of the pins to the handle material, and much more consistent appearance in the peened pin. And it's also an awful lot faster. So it's a win all the way around, more secure and faster. And that's what we're after. More better, more faster, and more cooler, I guess. Okay, so yeah, in fact, I might actually, I left another pair out. I might actually go ahead and shoot another video on that one showing you how to do it with micarta, if that's what you wanted to do. So I think this is 15, or I might not. I haven't decided yet. I'll get this one downloaded and then decide. So again, this is Joe Calton with Calton Cutlery. You can find me on the web, caltoncutlery.com. Hope you enjoyed the video on prepping a full tang knife handle scales from a block of wood. And yeah, we'll see you next time.